Thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to join us here for Stranded in Asia. I really appreciate you making the time for me tonight. We're going to go on some adventures, talk about life, and I'm going to teach you everything that I know, which at 24 isn't everything, but it's still something. So first, just to kind of give you a bit of an introduction to the journey that I took, I wanted to start with a video.
Might seem strange to you, my friend, but some things are always heaven sent. The more you want, the harder it gets. The more you let go, the more you get. It's a crazy, beautiful life. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Some things make sense and you don't know why. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Nothing lasts forever. Someone told me so. Life is always changing, ain't what you think you know. Even if you're standing still, you're floating in space. So grab a hold of your heart and you'll find your place in this crazy, beautiful life. In this crazy, beautiful life. Some things make sense and you don't know why. It's a crazy, beautiful life. Wherever you are, whatever you do, whatever wishes might come true. Whatever you got, whatever you give, you make it a beautiful life to live. It's a it's a crazy, beautiful life. Some things make sense and you don't know why. It's a crazy, beautiful
To the adventure. So Gui Ren is a written Chinese phrase that means the right people coming into your life with synchronicity to help guide and inspire you. This is a journey of self-discovery, but this is also a journey of connecting with people I never otherwise would have met and communicating with them in all different kinds of ways to learn from each other and have some kind of mutual beneficial friendship. So once upon a time, I was a child, and I played with building blocks. Anyone else play with building blocks as a kid? They're fun. You get to build your own foundation, build any kind of structure that you'd like to using different kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. And I was really into this idea of being able to completely construct my own life. And so I had all the building blocks. I had all the right places, all the right pieces in all the right places. And that's where the story is kind of upon its foundation. Maybe. I went to Wellington. I graduated from Wellington in 2013, and then I moved on to Butler, where I studied digital media production, and graduated with a degree in that in 2017. So by the time I graduated, I felt like I had a lot of experiences under my belt, but a lot of those had to do with travel. So in high school, I had the opportunity to travel abroad to Chile with a group of students. We stayed in Concepcion for a week with our host families, where I got a real first-hand experience of what it meant to be a Chilean at that time. And then I decided to go back. And then I decided to go back to Chile on my own excursion after working hours and hours as a lifeguard in high school to help fund my own trip. And in the spring of 2013, I went to France, which I'm not sure if that part is popping up. Well, imagine the French flag right there. Having some technical difficulties this evening. So I decided to stick with the same color scheme and go to France with another study abroad group. And so we spent a week in Toulouse with host families where, again, I got a hands-on experience going to school every day, going to classes in different languages, and getting to really see the foundation of a family life in those cities. And then we went to Paris for a week. Yes, please. We went to Paris for a week where we got a little bit more of a hands-on experience with the history and the rich culture of French life. And then in college, I knew that I was applying to a study abroad program before I even knew that I was applying to Butler. I had the opportunity to go to Western Europe with a group of 20 other wonderful women, where we traveled to 5 different countries as part of the program and then several other countries as part of a weekend excursion. And so in this, I started to meet a lot of locals and talk to people about their experiences and culture. And we had conversations that dove as deep as politics and humanism and religion, all at European bars at 11 o'clock in the evening, talking about real issues that are widespread across the globe with strangers I had just met 10 minutes prior. So it was a really phenomenal experience that kind of opened my mind to the types of conversations that I could have with people I've just met 5 minutes before. And then in the summer of 2016, I had an opportunity to do an internship abroad for 6 weeks in China. So I had originally applied to this program as part of an application for a National Geographic Fulbright Fellowship, but ended up taking a little bit of a different turn with my path. So during this internship, I got to work with this phenomenal mentor who connected me with global leaders from all over the world of all different kinds of industries. So I took video and created projects to help highlight some of the phenomenal stories of people around the world who are making positive changes and strides in sustainability, entrepreneurship, social responsibility, corporate responsibility. So not only was I gaining great insight into how to utilize a camera and be a storyteller, but I was getting to tell some really incredible stories. And I was getting to learn from these entrepreneurs and businessmen and women who were willing to share their perspectives with me and with my mentor. So I continued to work for this man throughout the rest of my senior year of college. And I continued to edit remotely and send things back and forth from Indianapolis all the way back to China. And in February of 2017, I got an email that said, expenses obviously covered, equipment provided, salary to be discussed, awesomely guaranteed. He wanted me to come back after I graduated from college for a 3 to 6 month project where I would live in Asia and continue to carry out the projects that we had started that previous summer. Here I was, a senior in college, thinking, well, this is the time when I'm supposed to be sending out my resumes, I'm supposed to be networking, I'm supposed to be finding something secure that I can then start climbing up the ladder of success until I retire, right? Like that's where I'm supposed to be headed. And all of my friends were applying to these amazing jobs and beginning internships, and I was sitting there staring at this email in my inbox going, 9 to 5, secure work, start my 401k, have insurance, start building my resume, my demo reel, or I could go on an adventure. And with all the travel experience that I'd had leading up until that point, I think it's pretty clear to know what my decision ultimately was. So the salary was going to be $7 an hour, but he was going to pay for all of the travel to go to up to 7 different countries together, to interview with people from all over the world in a lot of different industries, even furthermore than what we had experienced that previous summer. So the pay was not going to be substantial by any means, and in the back of my mind, of course, were student loan payments when I returned, but the adventure would be worth it, the stories would be worth it, the personal development would be worth it, and I would get to continue working with a mentor whom I had deep respect for. So I said yes. And in June of 2017, I got on the plane knowing that my building blocks were in place. I would have a bachelor's degree. I'd get international work experience. I would get to network with global leaders. And that meant that down the road, when I came back in December after that 6-month stint was over, I would have job security and opportunities. Whether that meant that I would find a job while I was over in Asia already and just move abroad, or if that meant coming home and at least having something really epic to show my potential future employers. My building blocks were set. So spring of 2017, I graduated and I packed up 6 months of my life and I headed for Asia by myself. Here's what I knew going into it. I knew how to navigate the metro from the previous summer that I had spent there. I knew where to locate the best baozi, which is delicious fun, by the way. I knew the wonderful world of WeChat, which is essentially all of the apps that you can possibly imagine on your phone all rolled into one. You can use WeChat to message your parents back home. You can use WeChat to pay your bills, book a taxi, buy movie tickets, rent hotel rooms. It had everything I needed, and that was a perfect thing for me to have when I first started out on my own. I knew how to use chopsticks, albeit it was a difficult journey to learn that originally. I knew the type of power adapters that I needed. I knew how to say hello and thank you, although I didn't know much more than that. And I knew what the currency looked like. Here's what I didn't know. Everything else. I didn't know how to find a first apartment, let alone doing it in Mandarin. I didn't know what the grocery stores were going to look like, because before, all of our meals had been paid for. I didn't know how to get a SIM card. I didn't know that I would need a Chinese bank account to use WeChat and help transfer funds or pay my bills. So all of that was a learning experience for me to figure out, and I had to learn how to be vulnerable very quickly. Shanghai became a mentor in more ways than one because it not only forced me out of my comfort zone, but I also started to pick up tidbits of information. I started to learn things that would help me figure out all of these other questions that I had. And one of the very first things that I learned was that shame is a decision. If you want to dance in the parks, go for it. If you want to wear your PJs out to the grocery store, go for it. And when it gets hot, and it's hot a lot, you just roll up your shirt, guys. Just roll them up. It's apparently a very cooling effect. I learned that if I was going to feel ashamed for something, it was on my own terms. No one else was going to look at me and decide whether or not I was going to be feel shame. Shame was my own decision and my own creation. The other thing that I learned was that I needed to be aggressive. China does not slow down or stop for anyone. If you let it run you over, it will. And it's not necessarily a get out of my way, you suck kind of way. It was I've got places to be, things to do, I have a purpose, and I'm going to do it whether you like it or not. And I had to figure out how to embrace that very quickly. Because no matter how many times that bank teller told me that they would not open a bank account, I kept going back, and turns out it was the simple apostrophe in my name that was the only reason they didn't want to give me an ATM card. Persistence. I also learned the significance of impermanence. This is a view right outside of my apartment room. This used to be a lovely arts district, and every day I would walk through it, and I would cut through it to the metro. And as I did, I would look at all of the different art sculptures and the little cafes, and there was a little wine shop that had an art gallery attached to it. And every day I would walk through there and think, man, this would be a great place to come spend an afternoon. Maybe not one of the 103-degree afternoons, but a nice evening or afternoon sometime. I thought this would be a great place to put together a video project or take some photos. And then one day I looked out the window, and then I went down to the metro, and there was a chain on the fence. And building by building was starting to tumble down, and I still hadn't taken my videos, I hadn't taken my photos, and I certainly hadn't spent any time in the arts district. And so I started to realize that there's a power of opportunity. That was a missed opportunity for me. I kept putting it off because work was too much, or I needed to go work out, or I needed to go grocery shopping. And I realized that things will not wait around for me. Just as China is aggressive and everyone has a purpose and a direction, things will not wait for you either. The opportunity's there, you take it. And I started to embrace that. So I had these building blocks in place. I had all my degrees, I went to a great high school, I had a wonderful college experience, and I was setting off to China to be a digital media leader in this company. And after that, I had so many plans of what I could use and how I could talk to this experience about future potential employers and interviews and how much it built up my character and my ability to tell a story. But has anyone had this awesome structure that they've built and then someone comes along and just beats it down and it goes to shreds? It was kind of what I experienced. I knew something was wrong about 2 weeks into my job. I arrived and I didn't have the equipment that had been promised. My salary was $7 an hour, but I had to fight for every paycheck. Before I had left, I had received this wonderful email that said we've already confirmed trips to Shanghai, or to Singapore, to Hong Kong, to Indonesia, and Taiwan. And I arrived to find no trips planned and no trips intended. I also arrived to an office that was devoid of my mentor entirely. I didn't know where he was. I didn't have any work to do. I didn't have an office desk. I didn't have a key. And I didn't even have an email address. But I stuck in there because I thought everything will come and fall into place when he arrives back from his business trip. The man that I had worked with the previous summer was not the same man that I worked with the second time around. He somehow did a 180, and part of me still to this day wonders what happened, but it turned into a very abusive and unfortunate work situation. I had to fight for my paycheck. The work wasn't fulfilling. It was bare minimum and far less than what my talents was capable of. I wasn't getting to network with leaders from all over the world. I was filling out Excel spreadsheets most of the time. And I will never forget the time when I sat down across from him as he addressed some of my frustrations, and he said, "If you don't want to be here, you can go. I can easily replace you with 2 Chinese women for the same price of $7 an hour." And that was when I realized that something was very wrong. I don't know why, and I don't have to know why, but all of a sudden I was asked 3 very important questions by my roommate. She asked me, "How is this helping your finances? Do you feel like you're building a secure future for yourself?" I was like, "No, I'm being paid $7 an hour, and even then there's missing money." She asked me, "How is it helping your career? Do you feel like you're building something that you can take home and be proud of?" And I said, "Not really. None of this work would be anything that I would show to a potential future employer." And then she asked me how I felt. And I don't know why, but it hadn't been something I'd considered up until that point. And I realized that I was waking up in this international city full of opportunities, depressed and angry. I was upset with myself for getting myself into this situation, and I was really angry with him for turning what could have been a wonderful experience into something that was heartbreaking and disappointing. And so I decided I have to make a change. I didn't quite get the chance to quit my job because I was quite literally just shunned. I just stopped responding to my messages, so I took it that I was done. And I packed a backpack that I was fortunate to just happen to bring along with me on this journey because I otherwise would have been very unprepared for backpacking. And I booked a trip out to Western China. I decided I'm going to make the most of this failed building blocks that I've created, and I'm going to make the most of it and start traveling. And this was a tough decision because as a recent graduate, I knew that there were going to be a lot of financial burdens up ahead, but I also decided that changing my plane ticket was going to cost more than simply staying in China. And why stay in China if I have an entire Southeast Asia at my fingertips? So I went to Xi'an. I went to Xi'an to visit the Terracotta Warriors. I went to Lanzhou, which was a stop so that I could get my overnight 14-hour train to Dunhuang, which was an experience in of itself. And in Dunhuang, I went and touched the sands of the Gobi Desert, and then flew to Chengdu, where I got to hang out with those giant happy pandas. And then I dropped down to Lishan for a day tour, where I got to walk in the shoes of everyday life in China. And then I went back to Shanghai, where I began planning my next journey. And my first experience with this trip was this wonderful woman named Niu. Niu and I were sitting next to each other, and for the first hour, we didn't really do much talking. We kind of did the smile and nod and go back to what we were each working on. I was working on learning how to solve a Rubik's Cube. But after I had finished that, I kind of started to grow bored because I thought it would take me a lot longer to figure out how to solve that cube. And so as my eyes were kind of wandering around, I noticed that Niu was scrolling through one of her social media sites. And I was intrigued because it was a Chinese social media, and I've never seen anything like that before, and I couldn't read any of the characters, but I could at least look at the pictures. And so I just kind of let my eyes wander, and she scrolled upon this trend at the time called the Dad Bod Fanny Pack. Has anyone seen that or heard of it? It's a fanny pack, but instead of having, a nice color or design, it just has a picture of a gut. So when you wear it, it looks like a gut is hanging out from beneath your shirt. Niu was very amused by this and started laughing, and I was very intrigued. And so as she laughed, she sat back in her seat and she noticed that I was staring at her phone. And so here's awkward me. I just looked at her and I laughed with her, pretending like she had invited me to scroll with her hours ago. And surprisingly, this worked. She looked at me and she gave me a smile, and she pulled out her translator app on her phone, and she started typing like a madwoman. And for the next 6 hours, we went back and forth on Translate, her Chinese version and my Google Translate. And we talked about her choir performances. We talked about her son. We talked about her going to Xi'an for her history conference because she's an educator and wanted to expand her depth of knowledge in history. And at one point, I went up to the food cart because I was getting hungry and didn't want to break into the massive amount of Cliff Bars that I had stuffed in my backpack. And I couldn't really find anything that I wanted to eat because most of it was weird flavors of Lay's and chicken feet. And so I walked back with a tea, and that was not okay with Niu. Niu started begging me to go back to the dining car with her. She told me I could buy whatever I wanted, however much of it, but she wanted to feed me. That was her one mission, was to give me food. And of course, me, knowing that there was nothing there that I truly wanted, I kept having to decline. And finally, in one last attempt, the second attempt was she offered me a bite of whatever kind of burrito she was eating. She had already bitten off, and she tried to hand it to me. It's really okay. I'm not that hungry. And then in one last attempt, she pulled out this little yellow package and handed it to me. And it was very clearly vacuum sealed something. So I opened it up cautiously, and I squeezed at the bottom, and up slid this brown, gooey, slimy thing. And it smelled like a meat shop had just exploded in the train. And so she looked at me very eagerly, and I kind of took some nibbles. And it wasn't bad. It was spicy, but it tasted okay. It was definitely very meaty. So I finished eating it, and she looked at me very expectantly, like, "Did you like it?" And so, of course, me not wanting to be rude, I went, "Yeah." So then I got an entire Costco-sized bag of these individually wrapped mystery meats. She stuck them proudly in the back seat of the seat in front of me and turned back and went back to her phone. And by the time we started to get off the train, Niu became very worried. Everyone was standing up, putting on these heavy winter coats, and I was wearing a very thin black jacket. It had been an 80-degree day in Shanghai when I left, and I really didn't bring any winter gear with me, but everyone else was putting on heavy scarves and mittens and coats. And I thought, well, what's next? Earmuffs? I mean, how cold can it really be? And so Niu looked very worried, and she kind of went like this with her sweater, and I said, "It's okay, I'm fine. I mean, the Chinese are known for being very unusually cold. I'm American, I'm used to this, it's fine." Well, I got off onto the train, in the train station, and I could feel how cold it was blowing through. And she looked at me like, "I told you so." But here's me being 22 years old. "I'm fine, I can do it." But before we depart ways, she leans over, she grabs my arm, she leans over into her suitcase, and she unzips the outside pocket, and she pulls out this yellow silk scarf. And I think, that's not really going to help much, Niu, but thank you. And she goes on her tippy toes, and I kind of bend down, and she wraps it around my neck and gives me a look that says, "Don't get cold. I told you so." And it was such a moving gift for me because this woman knew nothing about me. I told her what little that I could, but translation apps aren't perfect. And we didn't get all that deep into my belief system or where I came from or what I wanted to do with my life. And here she was imparting these gifts so generously upon me that she felt like family. She quite literally fed and clothed me for no other reason than I smiled at her, and we started talking about what she loves to do. And it was a very eye-opening experience for me because I thought, what other possibilities are out there for me? The next person that I met was this lovely woman whose name I do not know. I was in the Gobi Desert, and I wanted to take some opportunity to get some yoga shots in the sand because it's not frequently that you find that much sand in the state of Ohio, and I thought it looked cool. And this woman had been watching me, and she had had her little son with her. And she came up to me as I was finishing, and she kind of tapped me on the shoulder and went like this. I went, "Okay." It was very obvious that I couldn't speak Mandarin, and she certainly didn't speak any English. And so she led me over to where I had been standing, and she starts helping show me where she wants me to put my ligaments. And this was the end result. And it was a beautiful experience because she was so happy to have someone to do yoga with. And let me tell you, it's not easy to do yoga on sand, particularly Gobi Desert sand. You sunk faster than you could catch your ground. But with her, I was completely steady. Between the two of us, we were able to create a visual piece that worked. And after she sent me these pictures on WeChat, she sent me something along the lines of a very poorly translated English message that said, "Thank you, yoga, bring us together." The next person that I met was this lovely, I believe he was 82-year-old man. We had been in the city of Lashan, walking through some alleyways of where a lot of locals lived, and it was a very non-trafficked part of town. It was obvious how untouched by tourism it was, simply because people didn't stare at me or chase me down or beg me to come into their shops or take pictures of my hair. And so as we walked, we started to meet the storytellers of Lashan, which all of these storytellers will be in the book. But this one particular man stood out to me, and we were fortunate enough to go into his home and have tea with him. Our tour guide had been close with the family, and so he was able to kind of tell us a little bit about this man and his history. And as we sat there, this man's mind was very far away. And our tour guide told us the neighborhood joke that everyone asks this man how tall he is. And he says, "Oh, I'm 6'7". And everyone says, "No, you're 4 foot, only a boy." Because while his age shows much experience, his mind had kind of drifted, and he didn't have much more to share with us. And as we sat there, our tour guide was telling us the story about his home and how it had survived the Cultural Revolution because it had 2 courtyards, which at the time of the revolution was not permissible. However, his family was big into gambling and had accidentally gambled away one of their courtyards to another family. So when the Red Army came to investigate their home, they could honestly say, "We only own one of them." And their house is still remaining to this day because of that unfortunate.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention? Could Anab Abdulrahman please come to the front desk? Anab Abdulrahman to the front desk, please. Thank you.
I was like, it sounds like an airplane announcement. And so he told us the story about how this home had been built by his great-grandfather and how this man had been born in it and has stayed there ever since, and how much history and richness of culture still survives in there to this day. And then he told us a story about this man's brother who got on the wrong side of the war and had to flee to Taiwan. And for years, approximately 34, I think, his mother mourned the loss of her child because she was sure that he had died. They hadn't heard anything from him. He had gone missing. And so they burned offerings at a makeshift grave for him for 30 years. And right before his mother passed, she received a letter from Taiwan that said he was alive and well. And shortly after there, she died. And it was said that she was crying so much because she was so happy to know that he was alive and that she had survived simply to know that her son was okay. And in the very back of that house, behind that faint blue curtain that you can see in the background, is her resting place, where she sits with a picture of his brother. And so I was so caught off guard because our tour guide fortunately had this connection with this family, but this man was willing to have us strangers in his home and to share with us this deep history of his own familial ties and what had happened to them during one of the hardest times of their life. And I was so honored that they were willing to share that with me. And there were several other people in the courtyard, including this man's wife that was sitting over there playing mahjong, a very common game in China. And she was so friendly and inviting and pouring us tea and making us at home in a place that was so dear to their hearts. And it was truly an honor to be able to enter the lives of people who had so many stories to tell. Because I realized shortly that it was no longer about my journey. It was about collecting these stories of people from all over the world who had so much more experience and love to offer. I met Zaman when I went parasailing in Malaysia. So the second trip that I took, I went to Malaysia, then Singapore, Indonesia, and Taiwan. And when I first got to Malaysia, I was sitting on a beach watching people go parasailing back and forth, and I thought, good Lord, that must be such a tourism ripoff. You know it's got to cost like $50 to go do that one thing for 10 minutes. But I also thought, you know what, how frequently am I going to be on a beach in Malaysia? I may as well go and give it a shot. So fortunately, my time in Asia had taught me bartering skills well enough that I got them to knock it down to $20. And up I went, overlooking the entire island of Penang in a parachute. And attached to me was this guy named Zaman. Zaman was not a very talkative dude, but he seemed very friendly and engaging. And so we went up in the parasail together, and I was taking some videos on my GoPro. And then we had a very awkward landing because you just kind of got to run into it, and I wasn't quite good at that. And then we sat on the beach in each other's company for a while beneath the shade. And while we were sitting there, he asked me, "You go to Monkey Beach?" And I said, "What's Monkey Beach?" And he pointed way far off in the distance at this little inlet of land, and he said, "Monkey Beach is there. You go hiking?" And in my mind, I wasn't prepared for a hike, nor did I really want to spend that much time in a jungle when it was 95 degrees plus humidity. But he said, "I used to go. My friends don't go very much, but I want to. Will you go with me?" And I thought, well, my parents told me not to talk to strangers, and also probably not go into a remote jungle with them. So I asked him if I could bring a friend, knowing full well that I was traveling by myself, but thought his response will tell me a lot. And he went, yeah, of course. So I said, okay. So we exchanged numbers and we agreed to meet back at the beach at 10 a.m. the next morning. So I show up prepared to, take a car to the National Forest. It was a straight shot and all would be well. I'd end up in the National Forest, walk through there, pretty safe area, and then walk back, take a car back, and I'd go home. 3 hours tops. He pulls up on a motorbike with an extra helmet. I went, my mom's really going to kill me now. So I get onto the back of this guy's motorbike, and I just have it in mind that it's a straight shot. It's a straight shot. If anything goes wrong, I'll know where we are. And so he takes off down the road. We're flying past shops and restaurants, and we get into this remote area, and then all of a sudden he turns left. And I start to go into panic mode and think about throwing myself from the back of this bike, but it was as though he could read my mind when he yelled back into the wind, "I want to show you Penang." So I said, okay. So he took me to a gas station where he bought me some orange juice and filled up his tank, and then we took off again and went all around the island of Penang. He showed me hidden waterfalls that not many tourists know about. He took me all the way up to the durian farms where he had me try the stinkiest fruit in the world, which was an experience, let me tell you. Not horrible, wouldn't recommend it. And then he took me past some of the butterfly gardens and some of the attractions that I didn't think I was going to have time to see because of my short time frame. And then at one point on our way to the National Forest, he pulls over to the side of the road, and I think, surely this is it. And he gets off his bike and he says, "Your turn." And I go, "What? Excuse me?" He says, "You drive." He must have thought that I had tons of experience driving motorbikes, because he was surely out of his mind if he thought that this stranger was going to drive his bike and be okay. But I hopped on, he showed me how it worked, and I took off down the road without him. And so after pulling back around, I thought, okay, I'll sit back here now and we'll continue. And he said, "No, you're driving." Okay, so we hopped on the back, and here we were driving down the coast of Malaysia while the sun is beating on our faces, and I'm like, surely this is the eat, pray, love of Penang. It was unbelievable. Not only to have been shown the entire island of Penang, an island that I didn't think I was going to have time to see, but also to have this complete stranger trust me with his only mode of transportation around the island. And so we get to the national park and we hike, and it's fairly quiet. The man, like I said, isn't very talkative. But I learned enough about him to know that he loves watching documentaries and he loves cooking. And between his job working with the sports company on the beach and the beachside bar, he has a pretty good life. He said he's very happy. And by the time we get through the national park to Monkey Beach, and we climb up the top of this lighthouse on the coast, and we're sitting up there together, drenched in sweat. It was disgusting. And he says, "You have to trust to be happy. To trust everyone risks heartbreak, but to trust no one guarantees loneliness." And that has stuck with me and has been the motto of everything that I've done since. In Cambodia, which was part 3 of the trip, I went to Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. I met this wonderful group of students who are helping to change the poverty cycle in Siem Reap by offering other students scholarships to start studying business and get the leadership skills that they need to take them and their families out of poverty. So these kids are from rural areas in Cambodia and go to Siem Reap to get their education and send money back home. And in the meantime of doing all of that for themselves and staying very busy with their own education, they're also going out and building homes for the poor and feeding the poor and creating their own projects to help bring education about personal hygiene and wellness to students and kids and families who otherwise would not be able to afford it. And this was truly a great connection because it was something I had walked past in the night. I'd walked past in the night market. They handed me a sample, and I said thank you, and I kept going. And then on the way back, they caught our attention. And it was simply because of the energy that was coming out of that store that my friend and I went in, and we learned all of this while eating frozen yogurt, which just isn't a better combination in my mind. I ended up, by the time that I left Asia, I went to all these different cities in China. So I took a couple weekend trips here and there. I went to Hong Kong, Bangkok, went to Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Taiwan, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what my bill was? I had $3,000 left in my savings, so I couldn't have gotten much more than that. It's $2,000. All of that on $2,000 by staying in hostels that were $7 a night. I always picked the safer ones, the ones in the good parts of town, the ones that had storage lockers. So I was very cautious in my selection, but travel in Asia was cheap enough that I could do it on a budget, and I could get to all of these places and meet all of these incredible people. I was in Taiwan. I'll back up. I was in Singapore visiting a previous coworker. And I had been telling her about all these extraordinary stories that I've been collecting and all these people that I've been meeting. And she said, well, what you've got there is Gui Ren. And I said, what is Gui Ren? And that's when she told me that it is people coming into your life with synchronicity to help guide you, inspire you, to be there for you when you least expect it or really don't know that you even need it. And then it wasn't until I got to Taiwan that I realized I had to write a book about this. All of these people were willing to be vulnerable with me, so much so that they were quite literally bringing me into their homes and having tea with me and giving me all of the information that they had, not only about their own history, but also about their perspective and their personal growth and how those experiences have changed them. So there were four kind of key takeaways that I had from this experience. And the first one was that your foundation will tremble, but you will be rebuilt. Those building blocks that I had so carefully put together were so important to me that I wasn't willing to lose those or knock those down simply for an opportunity to travel. I hadn't realized that opportunity was in front of me the entire time. I was so determined to make it work that I worked for that man for 3 months before I finally realized that I deserved better, that my storytelling deserved better, that there was so much more out there for me. And so slowly, piece by piece, I started to rebuild those blocks that he had just taken out from underneath me. And I realized that there was maybe a different path I could take. It wouldn't be the path that I expected, but maybe it was the path that I needed. There is always a choice, even if it's not an easy one to make. Quitting my job was very difficult to do. It was a crappy income, but money was the first thing on my mind. Because I didn't want to come back empty-handed, moving into my parents' house as every parent fears the most. I didn't want to be a failure. I didn't want to come home and say I have nothing to show for this. But then I realized that just because I make one decision and decide to take a different path doesn't mean it's a failure. It means it's an opportunity. And what's the great quote about failure is only failure if you don't learn from it? Impermanence is far more of a blessing than a curse. I realized that the pain that I had could disappear just as easily as joy could. I spent so much of my life clinging to joy, thinking that it was the only thing that I had to cling to, and that if I lost it, all would be lost. But joy comes and goes just as pain does. And I had to learn that very quickly, because otherwise I never would have been able to pull myself out of the depression that I felt in such a country full of opportunity and relationships. You are extraordinary. Everyone that I met, whether or not I could communicate in English, had a story to tell. And in listening to their stories, I started to create my own. And in telling their stories, I've connected with more people simply because of practicing that vulnerability and sharing that information. We live in a time of social media and electronic communications that allows us to stay connected with people all over the world. But none of that could have helped me connect with the people that I did in Asia. Those stories, those people that I got to sit face to face with and learn about were really where the true value lied. Gui Ren is going to be a celebration of all of those stories and the people that I had the honor to learn from. It's going to be the in-depth experience of what it was like to move abroad as a single young female. It's going to be the experience of what it was like to have to face hard decisions as a young college grad, and what it was like to rebuild myself after all of those blocks have been tumbling down. I'm so excited to bring these stories to you and to share this adventure with you, not only because it was a thrilling adventure of solo travel, but also because I learned so much about what it meant to live a purposeful and a joyful life. My life has not panned out the way that I thought it would when I came back from Asia. I got a lot of encouragement to find a job, to start saving that money back up. And I haven't done that. I've spent the time talking about it. I'm working at a gym. It's not the best job that I could be working, but I love it because it helps me continue to connect with people. It's brought me different relationships into my life that I never would have expected simply by cold calling people and asking them how their experience is going. It's a job I thought for sure when I got back I'd spend 3 months in, I'd lose the weight that I gained eating all those noodles, and then I'd be on my way. But I'm still there a year and a half later because I realized that there was an opportunity there to continue talking to people and meeting people and having these connections. These types of connections, Gui Ren, is in everything that you do. They're at the grocery store, they're at the bank, they're at the movie theater. Although you probably shouldn't talk through the movie, people probably will. Gui Ren is around every corner you turn, but you have to be open-minded enough to see it. And I'm not perfect at it either. I fall back into routine and I get busy with work and busy with all of the projects that I have going on that I forget sometimes. But that's why I wear it on my wrist every day. It's a reminder. I have a bracelet that says Gui Ren. It's a reminder every morning that I get up that there's a possibility for this to become real for me today. And that is what I want to give you, is to open your minds and hope that tomorrow, tonight, next week, you might find a Gui Ren. And they're not going to come in the places that you expect it. They're going to come in unexpected places, probably at a time when you don't even really realize that you need it. And celebrate that. Because it's a wonderful opportunity that we have to connect with one another, and it's been shut down so frequently by technology that we need to bring that back into our lives. Thank you so much for listening to my journey, and I'd love to take any questions from you. Yeah.
Have you created a bunch of video blogs on some YouTube channel or something of all your travel videos?
I have. Yes. So I believe if you go to my website, onmylist.org, if you scroll down the page, there's media. I did some vlogs while I was traveling and while I was still working. So all of my adventures, I took tons and tons and tons of footage. So 75% of that is on YouTube. The other 25% I still have to sort through. Any other questions? Yeah.
Where's Butler?
Butler is in Indianapolis. It's the basketball school. I did not play basketball, though. I'm too short. Everyone's first question when I told them I was going to Butler was, "Are you going to play basketball?" And I went, "No." Yeah.
Are you still in touch with anybody you've met in Asia?
I am, especially New. I sent her a picture of my winter coat as soon as I got into the city. And I messaged New a little bit ago with a picture of the book cover, which is sitting over there. It's not my actual book inside of there. I believe that you have to visualize your success, so I printed the book cover and put it around a different book. I'm kind of cheating. But I sent her a picture of the book cover, and I told her, thank you for helping inspire this. And she sent me back something wonderfully, horribly translated, like, right people, right time, right hearts.
So are you writing the book now, or is it published, or?
It's written. It's being edited. So I'm in the editing process. I've got a wonderful editor that I'm working with, and I'm hoping to have it out by end of summer.
And you can do ebook?
I believe so, yep. I'm going to self-publish through Amazon. It's one of those things where I realized the title isn't in English, and I'm pretty stuck on the cover art, and I didn't want a traditional publisher to come in and say, well, you need to take this part out of the book, or you need to change things here and there. I wanted to market it in all of its authenticity, because there's not a part in there that I want to change. It's all very real to me. So self-publishing was the way that I wanted to go with it. So it will be on Amazon. Yes.
Would you put the cover back on there and then tell us what the significance is of the gold and yellow?
Yes. So this is the scarf. Yeah, I'll hold it up.
Oh, wow.
This is the scarf that you gave me.
Warm.
And let me tell you, I'm pretty pale skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. Yellow doesn't look great on me. And so this is really the only yellow thing that I own that I love. And so one night, this actually came to me in a dream. I was dreaming that I was drawing this yellow circle in chalk over and over and over again. And I mean, dream time is fairly short, but that dream must have been 5 hours because I was just drawing it over and over again. It's the only part of the dream that I remember. And I woke up and I thought, there's got to be some kind of significance to that. And I thought about the scarf because it's the only yellow thing that I owned. And then I realized that circles are symbols of being whole, being well-rounded, dad joke, being complete, being able to see the whole picture. And then chalk is a symbol of education, impermanence. And I thought, well, dagnabbit, I had a whole book cover worked out and this is just gonna have to be a replacement for it. Because I realized that this graphic has a bit of kind of an Asian art form to it in the orange, and then the yellow looks a lot like a chalk line. And so that's where that came from, entirely from a dream and realizing that there was a connection between her yellow scarf and...
It's very interesting because it's so different to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's nice. Thank you.
I should probably I might put that story in the back of the book, just on the... Yeah.
Are the Chinese people very superstitious about different things, like different colors and different numbers and things like that?
I actually did learn a story about, I can't remember what, it might be the 14. There's a number that they really don't like. It's bad luck. And so much so that they will, like if you'll go into an elevator and that floor just doesn't exist. So they've worked it even, it might be 14. So that number was not seen very frequently, which I didn't realize until someone pointed out to me. I got into an elevator and I said, well, what about 14? And they were like, well, not good luck. Obviously red is a really good fortune color for them. As far as bad luck colors go though, I don't know. Yeah.
How many weeks were you traveling then?
About 2.5, 3, no, far more than that. It was about a total of 10 weeks. I quit my job October, and then I came home December. So it was about 2.5 months in total, but there was a little bit of a gap time. I would go home to my apartment in Shanghai for a couple days, repack, reevaluate, and then go on my next one. So in total, it was probably about 8-9 weeks.
And who gave you advice on where to go?
The internet.
Oh.
Did a lot of Googling, but a lot of backpacker sites were very helpful in kind of giving me some direction. Also just talking to people who I met in restaurants and out doing tours and things. I kind of got a little bit of feedback from them. So I mean, honestly, I sat down and I went, coolest place to go in this country, because I had a whole list of places that I wanted to go. And that was pretty much how that. There were 2 places that I went simply to visit my old coworker who was in Singapore, because otherwise, if she hadn't offered to house me, I would not have been able to afford to go to Singapore. So she and her family were very generous and hosted me in Singapore for about a week. And then I went to Vietnam to visit one of my old roommates from Shanghai. So those 2 places were kind of I gotta do it because they're there, but the rest of them were just places I wanted to go. And the internet told me where the best place was. Although there's a lot of other places in those countries that I wish I had the time to go to.
Did you have any fears? Did you have any experiences that were negative at all?
There was one guy in Lanzhou. I took a train from Xi'an there, and then I had a 7-hour gap where I had to walk across the city or somehow get across the city to the other train station so that I could get to Dunhuang. And so I just kind of spent the day wandering around with all my gear, just kind of walking around. And I met a group of marketplace sellers that were very infatuated by my hair and my skin. And so they started kind of interacting with me and taking videos. But there was one guy who kind of had an odd odd look at me, and he tried to share information and we tried to translate to each other. But then he started asking questions like, well, who are you traveling with? Where are you living? You know, did you bring money with you? And all these things that, there were questions that made me uncomfortable enough that I said, you know what, my friends are waiting for me, I've got to go. And so that was really the only thing that stuck out in my mind as kind of an uneasy situation, but it was a very quick read. I knew right away just from looking at him and making eye contact that he didn't seem right. So there's always that fear in the back of my mind of something could go wrong. It's just an intuition of being able to read a situation. I mean, I didn't have that feeling when I got on the back of Zaman's motorbike. There was, of course, that fear in the back of my mind if something could go wrong, but I ultimately learned that trust is less about you trusting other people and more about trusting yourself to handle the situation if it doesn't work out. Yeah.
So what's your future travel goals?
Everywhere. I like to tell a story of when I was really little. We would take road trips to different places, and I would sit there in the back seat watching all of the world go by and think, I'm going to see every single inch of this world by the time that I die.
Wow.
Every inch of desert and jungle and everything, I was going to see it. And I realize now that that's a very unrealistic. But I'll go wherever I need to go in that moment. I think everything happens for a reason, and I'd really like to get to Spain and go back to South America for a while. There's not a single place that I don't want to see. Did you have a question back there?
Yeah, you were a remarkably good speaker.
Thank you.
You really are. Does that evolve partly from where you're traveling, I think, or have you always been like this?
I've always been a talker. My parents are both here. You can ask them. I did theater growing up, so that kind of helped. But before I started this form of storytelling, when I came back from Asia, I got in contact with Upper Arlington Library, and they said, well, let's do a series about what you've learned. And I was very nervous because I was used to telling other people's stories, but I'd never told my own before. And so this portion of the storytelling has kind of been very different for me because it's asking a lot of vulnerability and patience with myself as I continue to build my skill sets in that area.
Would this work for a TED Talk? I don't know much about those, but it seems like
I
that
hope.
would be...
Will you nominate me?
Yeah. Those 10 minis.
Huh?
They have a 10 mini, I think, where they're less than
Okay.
they're less than 30 minutes or something
Yeah.
like that. I don't know how long this talk was, but
Yeah. I don't actually either. I just kind of kept talking.
yeah.
Yes.
You said mentioned something about a tour guide. So did you pick up different tours in different cities, like just for a day or just for a few hours, or what?
It's kind of funny, actually. I have a thing with tour guides. I don't like them. Primarily because I have this whole theory about tourism versus travel. I never, ever, ever want to be called a tourist because tourists, the definition of the word is to get in, get out. You don't take anything with you. You don't learn from it. You're a tourist. I mean, if you're a tourist, you take the pictures, you go home, you don't learn anything from it. But if you're a traveler, you really let the experience set in. You talk to people. You become a different person because of that experience. And so it's possible to be a tourist within your own life anyways, if you really think about it that way. So I was very against getting a tour guide, actually. But the friend that I had went with, you saw her in the video, she was with the old guy in the calculator. She was like, no, this will be great. This is supposed to be a little bit more of a personal tour. And she was very right. So it was just me and her and the tour guide. And that made a world of difference because I definitely did not want to be following around someone with a flag going, follow me, please. Because that just doesn't vibe with the way that I prefer to travel. Tours are wonderful because you get to see things very quickly, but you see them. You don't always experience them. So finding a tour guide that helps with that experience part is very different.
I've had people tell me that it's best to travel alone because you meet many more people. If you're with one or two other people, you have to decide, agree upon where you're going to go and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I learned about that was I didn't realize before when I had traveled with my friends and study abroad programs that I was stressed all the time because if something didn't work out or if I suggested a route that didn't end well, I would feel guilty for ruining their experience. And so in this, I didn't care if I got turned around 12 times because I knew I'd figure it out and it didn't affect anyone else. And so that was also a very interesting experience, was to realize that even though travel can be stressful, I was very stress-free throughout the entirety of it because I was the only one who it really mattered to.
So you stayed a lot at youth hostels, things like that. So did you ever, like in your travels, come upon anybody that you traveled with for short distances? Or did you always travel by yourself?
I pretty much always traveled by myself. The girl that I met that we did the tour together, I had happened to meet her in Xi'an the week before, and it just so happened that she was going to be in Chengdu when I was, and so we kind of reconnected, but I traveled by myself. Yeah.
Did you travel with, did you have travel insurance, and what did you have as a plan if something went awry as far as your health or something like that?
I did have travel insurance. When I started traveling, I honestly didn't even really think about it. I went, you know what, if something happens, I'll figure it out when it does, but until then, I've got travel insurance at least, so I know I'm covered. I was very fortunate I didn't get sick. I had an undiagnosed what was it? Was it a sinus infection? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a sinus infection, which looked very different because apparently a lot of Westerners, if they get sick in Asia, they'll get a rash with whatever illness they have, and so I was freaking out thinking I had bed bugs. I scared everyone else in the hostel, but here it was just an untreated sinus infection. So that was the worst that I got, but I was very fortunate in picking foods that didn't give me food poisoning, because that's usually the biggest fear in people's minds in Asia.
Her insurance had emergency evacuation and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was covered.
Yeah, she was covered.
Yeah.
As a parent, did they always have the ability to know where you were and what you were doing?
Kind of. I definitely did not tell them I was getting onto the back of some dude's motorbike and going into the jungle until I was back. So there were some things that I didn't share until after I knew that they had worked out. But I was open with them and telling them that I wanted to go to Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, and the feedback was, we're worried. But I also had to realize that I was talking to backpackers who had just been there, and so I trusted the people who had just been there. So I kept the concerns in mind, but also realized that it's an entirely different world than what we see here on the media and in the news. So I still took caution. I went to a very touristy part of Cambodia, which was an interesting experience of itself because everywhere else that I had been hadn't been so. I heard more English in my hostel than I had been used to for the last 6 months, so it was actually kind of jarring for me. So I took their precautionary warnings and kind of weighed my own research. But for the most part, I was blogging, I was updating things on Facebook and keeping in touch with people back home and kind of sharing the experience. So I wasn't too far away. I always had some kind of internet connection at some point in time. Yeah.
Have you thought about being a Peace Corps volunteer?
I actually did think about that for a couple of years in college.
Yeah, it's quite an experience.
Yeah, that would be. It really would be.
And you'd be perfect.
Thank you. You can nominate me for that too. I got that here. Yeah.
Did you feel any kind of restrictions from the Chinese Communist Party?
I had to register everywhere that I went, which is for every Chinese citizen, which could be frustrating at times. The other worry that was always in the back of my mind was being scammed by fake police officers. That was a very common thing at the time that I was over there. Or people, locals would, bump into you, drop their groceries, and then claim that you hit them, or bump into you with their motorbike and crash and then have you pay all the medical bills, and they'd have fake police officers involved. So those scams were far and few between, but that was probably the biggest worry in my mind, was not the government itself, but locals taking advantage of me being an expat and not knowing the language, which really goes for any country that I went to. There was always that worry of being taken advantage of because I wasn't from there. But as far as the Chinese government, I never really felt restricted besides having to register everywhere. It was a pain, particularly once I started traveling through Western China. Having to know what papers that I needed was a learning experience. I got a lot of no's from people without any reason why. So I didn't really know what they needed because they just kept saying no, and not giving me any other explanation.
How do you register?
You have to have your passport, and then if you have an apartment lease, you have to prove that. You can't get a ticket, you can't get a travel visa to China without proving that you have somewhere to live. Mm-hmm. So I actually ended up booking a hotel room for one night. I booked it refundable sent in my visa, got it approved, and then canceled it. Which is the way that a lot of people get travel visas in there, especially if you're not planning on moving over there permanently. And then you have to have someone write a letter on your behalf saying that we are going to take care of you financially, because you can't just drop yourself in there without any plan.
But did you have to register in each town though? It sounds, did you?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, do they stop you at the border or?
The hostels will do it for you if you have, so you hand over your passport. I don't think I had to take anything else with me. So either the hostels would do it for me, or if I was actually staying in an apartment, I'd have to go find the local police station. So every time that I came back into China, after I'd been everywhere else in the world, I had to go to my local police station within 24 hours and register, or else you'd be fined.
They don't keep the passport, do they?
No.
They leave.
I take a copy of it. But that was always a very big fear of mine, was losing my passport.
Yeah.
Because it meant that I had to have it everywhere that I went, even if it was within the country I'd already had access to.
So none of the countries you went to took your passport and kept it until you left that country?
No. Although the Vietnam passport, the travel visa, was a longer, more enduring process than other countries. But none of the countries that I went to kept it. I think I would have avoided that place if it had been the case.
You said that you found a lot of your information online. Did you find any of that information inaccurate?
Yeah, frequently, actually. When I got to Xi'an, my plan was to go straight to the Terracotta Warriors, and I read online that there would be a bus from the train station I had arrived in, and there wasn't. I got to the booth and I said Terracotta Warriors, and she just goes, no. Okay, what do you want me to do now? So that was of course one of the first experiences that I had traveling by myself, so I was like, well, I don't really know how to go about this from here. So occasionally there was incorrect information, either online from other travelers or from the city itself.
How did you travel within the city though? I mean, did you? I know there's trains, but how do you? Are the taxis marked there, or how do you know if it's a legitimate taxi or? Yeah,
so there were taxis, a lot of motorbikes, tuk-tuks were some of my favorite, getting in the back of those carts and just taking off. I walked a lot of places. There's also a bike share program that I used while I was in China called Mobike. The trick to taxis was just knowing what to look for, so making sure that they were actually flipping the meter up when they started. I got into an Uber that wasn't Uber when I was doing my internship. That was kind of a terrifying experience, so now I ask them who they're here for, or I at least look for that sticker. So you kind of pick up on little tells of whether or not they're legitimate. But a lot of walking. So I was shocked that I came back with as much weight as I did from all the noodles, because I walked so much. But thank you so much, guys, for taking the time to. If you would like to connect with me, my information is up here, as well as I have business cards. And if you'd like to sign up for my email updates, I promise I won't spam you. I don't have time to. But I'll be able to send you an email when the book does come out, or send you any other opportunities to connect. So if you would like to share your contact information with me, I would be very grateful. Thank you again.